There is a cruelty to the way the universe shapes rare souls. You have felt it, haven't you? That strange ache when everyone around you seems to find love with ease, while you wander through silence, carrying a longing that refuses to be silenced. This is not abandonment. This is not punishment. This is the fire where you are refined. What feels like rejection is, in truth, an initiation. The first trial the universe imposes upon uncommon souls is solitude, not the solitude of choice, the retreat of monks or artists, but the solitude that presses itself upon you like an invisible exile. You sit in rooms full of people, yet feel utterly alone. You encounter faces, hands, voices, and yet none of them speak your language. Others seem to fall into relationships like stones dropping into rivers, while you remain suspended in air, watching the water move without you. Carl Jung understood this separation as a necessary stage of individuation. The psyche, if it is to awaken, must step away from the collective unconscious, the inherited values, desires, and illusions of family, culture, and society. Rare souls are forced into this exile not because they are defective, but because they are specific. They cannot settle into borrowed dreams. They cannot pretend satisfaction in places where their depth is unmet. In this first passage, the universe begins stripping away the illusions you once clung to. You are shown with painful clarity the difference between conditioned attraction and authentic desire, between the magnetic pull of familiar dysfunction and the resonance of true recognition. This separation is meant to sharpen your inner sight. It prevents you from confusing hunger with love or loneliness with intimacy. During this exile, despair often whispers that you are broken, that your inability to feel satisfied with the options around you is proof of a fatal flaw. But the silence of the universe in those moments is not indifference, it is discipline. It waits to see if you will collapse your standards to escape the discomfort, or if you will endure the silence until you can hear the voice of your own soul. It is in this unbearable solitude that the rare soul learns the first great lesson. Loneliness is not the same as solitude. Loneliness aches for another's presence. Solitude invites you into your own. One is absence, the other is expansion. If you can inhabit this solitude without desperation, if you can treat it as a laboratory rather than a waiting room, you discover yourself in ways no relationship could have taught you. This exile is the filter. It ensures that when connection finally arrives, it will not be mistaken for relief. It will be recognized as recognition. Those who rush to fill the emptiness discover too late that they have only recreated the very isolation they sought to escape. But those who endure the silence without abandoning themselves emerge with a sacred discernment. They can no longer be seduced by fragments. They wait for wholeness because they have learned to dwell in their own. Just when your solitude has begun to feel like both wound and sanctuary, the universe introduces the second test. Into your carefully guarded silence steps someone who seems to carry the very key you have been waiting for. Their presence ignites every dormant longing. Their words seem to speak the hidden language of your soul. For a time, it feels as though the desert of your isolation has bloomed overnight. This figure appears almost supernatural in their timing and resonance. They mirror your values, echo your dreams, and reflect your depth so convincingly that you begin to wonder if fate has finally opened its hand. After so long an exile, the relief of being seen, even partially, feels intoxicating. And yet, beneath this sweetness lies the seed of the lesson. This person is not who you believe them to be. Jung would name this apparition the activation of anima or animus, the archetypal inner image of the ideal beloved projected outward onto another human being. It is not the other you are falling in love with, but the fragments of yourself they awaken. What they adore in you is not your full being, but the parts of you that serve their own unconscious needs. What you adore in them is not their reality, but the reflection of your hidden wholeness. This encounter feels fated, but it is a test in disguise. The universe wants to see if you can distinguish between true intimacy and projection, between authentic recognition and the echo of your own longing. This almost lover teaches you the difference between being idealized and being known. They may genuinely care, yet their affection often carries conditions. They might cherish your sensitivity, but recoil from your intensity. They may admire your uniqueness, but quietly wish you would soften the edges of your truth. The danger here is not malicious harm. It is the quiet erosion of the self that occurs when you accept partial love as if it were whole. To remain with this person, you may find yourself trimming your nature, silencing inconvenient truths, moderating the very fire that makes you alive. And though such compromise may grant temporary closeness, it eventually feels like a betrayal of the soul. The universe does not punish if you choose to linger here. It simply allows you to taste the loneliness that grows inside a relationship where your wholeness is too much. Through this experience, you discover why settling feels like spiritual suicide. You learn that to be loved in fragments is not the same as to be loved, and you begin to sense, perhaps for the first time, the sacredness of being fully recognized. This test is not about avoiding the almost lover, it is about awakening through them. It is about learning to see when love is conditional, when intimacy is incomplete, when the warmth you feel is only a mirror of your own unclaimed fire. If you can walk away, not bitter but wiser, you emerge with sharper vision. You no longer confuse projection with presence. You no longer mistake being seen in parts for being embraced in your entirety. This is the universe's second lesson, to know the difference between mirage and oasis. Only then can you recognize the true reflection when it finally arrives. The third trial is perhaps the most subtle, and for many, the most treacherous. It does not arrive through another person, but through your own psyche. Just when the universe begins to guide someone genuinely appropriate into your orbit, someone who carries the possibility of real partnership, you may notice a strange resistance rising within you. Instead of joy, there is suspicion. Instead of trust, there is doubt. Instead of surrender, there is a sudden urge to retreat. It feels paradoxical. You have prayed for this, suffered for this, waited for this. Yet when it comes, your mind begins to dismantle the very gift you have been seeking. You start scanning for flaws, magnifying imperfections, or comparing this person to an impossible standard. Their consistency feels dull, their affection suspicious, their steadiness almost threatening. You begin to wonder if love this calm could possibly be real, or if you are merely deceiving yourself once again. Jung understood this resistance as the psyche's defense against transformation. For rare souls, solitude becomes more than a condition, it becomes an identity. You begin to define yourself by being the one who cannot be understood, the one destined to walk alone. When someone arrives who challenges that narrative, it threatens the foundation upon which you've built your sense of self. Here the shadow whispers its most insidious doubts. This will not last. They cannot possibly love the real you. Better to retreat now than risk devastation later. And so you sabotage without realizing it. You test their devotion, push them away to see if they will return, create unnecessary conflict to measure their resilience. Yet, beneath these maneuvers is fear. Fear that what you most long for will betray you as others once did. The universe does not intervene in this trial. It allows you to wrestle with your own defenses to discover whether your desire for love is stronger than your fear of being hurt. This is not about perfection, it is about recognition. Can you see the difference between wisdom and avoidance, between discernment and fear disguised as discernment? Can you let yourself risk disappointment in order to taste something true? Many fail this stage not because they are unworthy of love, but because they have become too skilled at protecting themselves. Yet protection, taken to its extreme, becomes prison, and the bars are invisible, built from suspicion, hypervigilance, and the refusal to trust what is unfamiliar. If you can face this mirror without turning away, you discover something astonishing, that love requires vulnerability, and vulnerability requires risk. There is no guarantee of permanence, no promise of safety, but there is the possibility of connection so real it dissolves the identity built around loneliness. This is the third lesson of the universe. You must learn to recognize when you are your own obstacle, to see that sometimes the enemy is not betrayal from the outside, but resistance from within. Only when you confront this sabotage with honesty and courage can you open your hands wide enough to receive what has been waiting for you all along. The fourth test is not about others at all. It is about the hidden cords that still bind you to outdated versions of yourself. The universe, before it delivers love that is real, demands a purification. It requires that you release not only toxic patterns, but also the subtle comforts that keep you small. It strips away the friendships that tether you to who you once were, the environments that reinforce your limitations, the roles and identities that once kept you safe but now suffocate your expansion. This stage is often misunderstood as loss. You may notice relationships fading, circles shifting, old passions turning hollow. What once gave you belonging now feels like a costume. The conversations that used to energize you suddenly sound empty, rehearsed, irrelevant. At first, it can feel like a collapse, as though life itself is unraveling. Yet, what is dissolving is not life, it is the scaffolding that concealed it. Jung described this as individuation, the painful process of becoming who you truly are, rather than who the world trained you to be. Rare souls are asked to confront the masks they still wear, the narratives that secretly flatter their wounds, the subtle ways they identify with being misunderstood. Even the victimhood that once felt sacred, the story of being the one too deep, too complex, too different to be loved, must be surrendered. This recalibration is not gentle, it demands brutal honesty. You must face the ways you have used your sensitivity as armor, your depth as a shield, your pain as a reason to remain closed. You must examine the quiet pride you may have carried in being rare, in being the one who could not be easily satisfied. For these very identifications, seductive as they are, prevent the soul from opening fully to love. The universe watches during this purge, not with cruelty, but with care. It asks, can you let go of the familiar even when it has defined you? Can you walk away from identities that earned you sympathy or recognition, but secretly locked you into loneliness? Can you release the very stories that once made sense of your suffering? If you resist, you may cling to relationships that no longer nurture you, environments that drain you, patterns that once felt like survival but now feel like shackles. Yet if you surrender, something miraculous occurs. Space opens, your frequency shifts. You begin to attract people and possibilities that resonate with your truest self rather than your wounded one. This is the universe's fourth lesson. Love cannot find you if you are still entangled with what no longer belongs to you. To receive the partner who can meet you, you must first shed the versions of yourself who would not have recognized them. The fifth initiation is not about letting go of people or places. It is about letting go of who you thought you were. This is the stage where the universe asks you to release even the most intimate attachments, your self image, your cherished wounds, the identity you built around surviving. For rare souls, this can feel like being asked to die while still breathing. It is here that the victim narrative often surfaces in its most seductive form. Perhaps you have carried pride in your suffering, finding meaning in being the one too sensitive, too wise, too scarred to be understood. This identity has given you strength when nothing else did, a sense of purpose when life felt unbearable. But the same story that once kept you alive now prevents you from living. Carl Jung called this part of the individuation process the death of the false self. It is not that your struggles are denied, nor that your wounds are erased. Rather, they are alchemized. Instead of defining you, they refine you. Instead of being chains, they become fuel. The pain you once used to separate yourself from others becomes the very doorway through which you rediscover connection. This stage is a crucible of honesty. You must face the ways you have hidden behind authenticity to avoid vulnerability, the ways you have claimed depth to excuse your fear of risk, the ways you have clung to being rare as though it absolved you from the terrifying possibility of real intimacy. These are not condemnations, they are revelations. They invite you to stop mistaking survival strategies for your essence. When you surrender these false anchors, something astonishing begins to stir. You feel lighter, not because your past disappears, but because it no longer imprisons you. You discover that authenticity is not about being different, it is about being whole. You realize that your uniqueness does not make you unlovable. It makes you capable of love at a depth others may never touch. The universe observes you here with particular care. This stage determines whether you are willing to shed even the noble versions of your suffering, the stories that made you special but kept you separate. Only by releasing them can you become someone who does not just survive love, but receives it fully. This is the fifth lesson, that your identity must be reborn. You are not the exile, not the almost lover, not the misunderstood soul wandering alone. You are the alchemist who has turned pain into power, exile into discernment, longing into readiness. And only from this place can true love recognize you without distortion. The sixth test arrives wrapped in paradox. After solitude, projection, sabotage, and purification, you might imagine the final key is to search harder, to summon love with all your might. But the universe whispers the opposite. You must stop seeking. Before true partnership can appear, you must release your attachment to finding it. This surrender is often the hardest passage of all. For so long, the search for love has been the silent engine beneath your days, the longing that accompanied your mornings, the ache that shadowed your nights. To give it up feels like defeat, like abandoning the very desire that makes you human. Yet Jung understood this moment not as collapse, but as individuation reaching maturity. You no longer hunt for someone to complete you. You begin to live as though you are already whole. This surrender is not apathy. It is not resignation. It is the quiet revolution of realizing that partnership is not the source of your worth. You stop scanning every room for possibilities. You stop interpreting every interaction as a potential sign. You stop measuring your progress in terms of proximity to union. Instead, you return to yourself. You begin living as though love is already woven into your being, not something you must extract from another. Here, the universe is not testing whether you can live without desire, it is testing whether you can hold desire without desperation, whether you can want love without being consumed by the wanting, whether you can recognize that love is not something to chase, but something to allow. This stage feels like a subtle death of expectation. Yet in that death, something luminous is born: freedom. You no longer approach others from hunger, but from fullness. You no longer ask them to rescue you from emptiness, but invite them to share the overflow of your presence. This shift transforms your very energy field. You begin to emit the quiet radiance of someone who does not need to be chosen because they have already chosen themselves. And it is here, in this paradox of surrender, that the universe smiles. For only when you no longer need love can you truly receive it. Only when you stop grasping does the current flow toward you. This is the sixth lesson: to stop treating love as a prize to be won and to recognize it instead as a reflection of the wholeness you already embody. And then, without warning, the one arrives, not as thunder, not as spectacle, but as recognition. You do not fall into them with desperate hunger, you meet them with calm certainty. There is no need to convince yourself of compatibility, no urge to silence doubts, no compulsion to shrink or perform. The connection feels less like a collision and more like a remembering, as if you are not encountering a stranger at all, but recognizing a soul you have always known. This is the moment the universe has been preparing you for. Every delay, every exile, every heartbreak now reveals its hidden purpose. You see how the solitude taught you discernment, how the almost lover exposed the difference between projection and intimacy, how self sabotage showed you the walls you built against your own happiness, how the purge dissolved the identities that once imprisoned you, how surrender transformed need into fullness. All of it led here so that when true partnership appeared, you would not mistake it for less. Jung would describe this as the union of individuated souls, two beings who have faced themselves deeply enough to meet without masks, without projections, without the demand to complete one another. In such a partnership, there is freedom inside the bond. There is room for solitude within union, space for growth within commitment, safety without suffocation. The relationship becomes not a prison, but a sanctuary, not a compromise, but a magnification of each soul's essence. In this union, love does not ask you to diminish your intensity, to hide your complexity, or to apologize for your depth. Instead, it celebrates them. Where others once found your standards intimidating, this person meets them naturally, not as a burden, but as home. You are not tolerated, you are treasured. You are not seen in fragments, you are embraced in your wholeness. This is why the journey had to be so long, why the universe withheld what seemed easily given to others. Rare souls are not meant for ordinary love. They are meant for love that amplifies, refines, expands, love that becomes an instrument of evolution, love that does not rescue but reflects, does not diminish but ignites. And so the final revelation unfolds. You were never being punished. You were being prepared, not denied, but refined, not overlooked, but carefully cultivated for the moment when two rare souls would meet in truth. This is the last lesson. The universe does not give rare souls love until they have become love, until they have walked through exile and shadow, through surrender and rebirth, and emerged radiant with the ability to offer what they once only sought. When you reach this place, partnership is not the answer to your emptiness, it is the celebration of your fullness. And when you look into their eyes, you understand at last every test was worth it.